sun up the tree. So I've had a love for trees since I was a tiny kid and still love trees today. So if we can get started with our slideshow.
Yeah, I think Aletha's going to put it back on the screen. Or she's trying to. There we go. Give it just 1 second. It should come up. And for everybody on the call, there's just a slight delay between these. So you'll hear Peter talk a little bit, and then he'll ask for the next slide. We'll click it over. There's about a 2 to 3 second delay.
All right. So this is just going to be a basic introduction to myself and to A+. We'll work through a few concepts of trees, and we'll have a bunch of questions and answers at the end. So quick about us. A+ has been in business for 20 years. We started in the Bay Area, and we're now all the way from Seattle down the West Coast to San Diego and inland to Salt Lake City. So we've been growing. We try to be as professional as possible. And we've got a lot of certified arborists that work for us. We've got a lot of fantastic resources. We've got a lot of crew members that we can pull from if we have really big jobs or really big needs or really big emergencies. We recently did the world record helicopter removal in Berkeley Arboretum. We removed a 170-foot tall redwood with a helicopter. The reason we removed it with a helicopter was we were requested not to damage any of the plant material, the rare and endangered plant material around the base of the tree. So we brought in a helicopter. So we've done some exciting things. We're not a fly-by-night organization. Why trees? Oh my goodness. So many, I think everybody could come up with an answer of why trees. They're an asset. They produce oxygen. They give us shade. They give us wood. They places for animals to live and insects to live. We're going to look at some of the do's and don'ts. If we can have the next slide. All right, the A+ vision is to inspire urban forest management through sustainability, education, and caring for others. Next slide. The A+ mission is to serve our clients with love and respect on the foundation of the 6 Duns. The 6 Duns is our commitment to client excellence and team experience. The 6 Duns are done safely, done on time, done on budget, done as promised, done with innovation, and done as a team. Next slide. We use this fantastic app called Arbor Plus. What happens is an arborist like myself shows up at your property and we inventory every single tree on the property. In this case, in your guys' case, all of the common area trees. And every tree gets a different colored pin. Next slide. I should say every species gets a different colored pin. This is not your property. But you can see all these different colored pins. They represent different species. And if this is what we give to the management company, and if they click on a pin, it opens up the pin and they can see what species it is, what they see a photograph or a series of photographs. All of our photographs get stored. So we've got years worth of history on each tree. It gives the size of the tree, the condition of the tree, the recommended work for each tree, and the history of the work for each tree. So this enables your management company to really keep track of their urban forest. Next slide. All right, why tree care? All right, everybody knows that trees are assets, but unfortunately, trees are also a liability. And I've said to lots of people, trees spend the first part of their life being an asset and the second part of their life being a liability. So my job is to kind of improve the asset side and decrease the liability side. All right, we're going to look at a few do's and don'ts. Next slide. All right, do's. have a management plan, check for hazards, do proper pruning, and include tree healthcare. All right, some of the don'ts. Don't wait for emergencies, don't prune badly, don't have a monoculture, and don't plant the wrong tree in the wrong place. Next slide. All right, do have a management plan. This starts with our inventory. So we come out and we inventory your property. This gives us quick access to data and your maintenance history. It gives your management company quick access to this data and their history. This allows them to make better decisions budget-wise. All right, next slide. Don't wait for emergencies. Emergencies can cost 3 to 5 times as much as scheduled tree care. Reactive tree care, also called playing catch up. Now, I think this tree in the photograph has fallen over. It's had a failure at ground level. So the roots and the soil plate have kind of pulled up out of the ground, and this tree's fallen on this apartment complex. If you look up at the top of this tree, it's fairly heavy looking. So possibly pruning this tree in advance of any winter storms would have stopped that from happening. But unfortunately, I was not given a crystal ball when I got my certified arborist. So it's quite possible that I would have looked at a tree like this a week beforehand and thought, that tree's in great condition, it's not going anywhere. So sometimes the wind just is stronger than the physics of that tree and that soil. Looking at this, it's possible that there's some new sidewalk there, and it's possible that there was some roots cut when the new sidewalk was put in. So things to think about when you're getting tree work done or sidewalk work done. All right, next slide, please. All right, do look for hazards. So when we come out to your properties, one of the things that we're doing constantly is looking for hazards. We look for dead trees, we look for diseased trees, we look for dangerous trees, and distance, which is also known as clearance. Next slide. So one of the things we get questioned about is we've got a leaning tree, and if you look at the tree on the left, that tree actually grew like that, and it's called phototropism. The photo means light, and tropism is growing towards. So it's growing towards light. And a tree like that can actually be really stable. So yes, it has a lean, but it grew that way. The tree on the right, you can see the soil cracking. You can see the soil and the tree separating at the base of the tree. This is a tree that's actually falling over, not growing in that direction. So that would be something that we'd want to remove. But the one on the left, we probably wouldn't remove. All right, next slide. All right, we get lots of calls about mushrooms, and depending on the time of the year, we have different mushrooms. One of the aspects of my job is telling other arborists and tree lovers whether the mushrooms are coming from a beneficial fungus or if they are a bad fungus that is decaying the base of the tree. So the mushrooms that you see on the left are they're called mycorrhizal mushrooms, and in the soil there's a lot of fungus, and every year the fruiting bodies pop out of the ground and they're eating the leaf litter, they're eating little twigs that are fallen on the ground, and they're not doing any harm to the tree, and in fact they're benefiting the tree. The fruiting bodies on the right are, looks to me like mushrooms from a armillaria fungus, which is a very bad fungus to have at the base of an oak tree. So part of my job is figuring out the name of the fungus and whether it's a good fungus or a bad fungus. All right, next slide. All right, some of the hazards that we're looking for: bark splitting and fractures. The one on the left is non-structural, but it still doesn't look very nice. In the summer or early summer, on a lot of trees, you get these vertical cracks. This is not a good representation of what I'm trying to say, but oak trees, for instance, will do a big expansion kind of at the end of spring, and you'll see some vertical cracks, but the crack will fill in, and these pictures don't represent this, but it's just a growth crack. As the tree increases in size, bark is not very flexible, and the bark gets some little splits in it, and when they fill in, then it's fine. When they don't fill in, then that's a problem. The cracks on the right-hand side are more cracks that go into the wood, so those are a structural issue. So being able to tell the difference between cracks in bark and cracks in wood, the cracks in the wood we need to take really seriously, because either that tree is on its way to failing or those branches are on their way to failing. All right, next slide. All right, don't prune badly. When we come out to your common areas and prune trees, we really try to do a nice job, and there's a International Society of Arboriculture, the ISA. They've set some rules of what kind of pruning is kind of acceptable and what kind of pruning is good for trees, and then the contrast to that, what kind of pruning is bad for trees. So don't prune without a good reason. Don't prune more than 25% of live foliage during a growing season. Don't strip out all of the inner foliage, also known as lion tailing. Don't top the tree. And don't use your landscapers if they're not D49 registered. Landscapers are insured to work up to a height of 12 feet. So I think there's a lot of small landscape companies that say, sure, they'll come and do your tree work, but they are actually not covered by their insurance. So if they go above 12 feet and anything happens, your insurance will be liable. Problems that these causes, or that these, if you look at these don'ts, here are the problems that they cause. I'm just going to change my view of this because I actually can't read my slide. There we go. Okay. Don't prune without a good reason. We don't want trees losing too many leaves. Don't prune more than 25% of the live foliage. We don't want branch weight imbalance and sun scald. If you prune off too many leaves, the sun will actually burn the bark, and you'll get bark death and wood death below that. Bad pruning can increase pest and stress vulnerability. So if you prune the tree too hard and the tree grows back a bunch of new material, that new soft material is much more likely to be attacked by pests and diseases. If you top the tree, which is what we see in this photograph here, this leads to a growth spurt of much weaker branches, because everything new that grows on the tree is no longer securely attached to the tree. Don't use your landscapers if they're not D49 registered. This doesn't save you money and is a huge liability for you. All right, next slide. These are actually photographs taken from the River Lake area. On the left, we've got some nice, healthy redwoods. On the right-hand side, we've got some excessive thinning. Now, a redwood really doesn't need to be pruned. There's absolutely no reason to come in and take branches out of your redwood or take foliage out of your redwood. It does not increase its ability to withstand wind. It irresponsible tree vendors will tell you that it allows the wind to pass through, but the tree is not a sail. If you look at a tree in the wind, the tree sways in the wind, and each branch sways at a different rhythm, and each twig sways at a different rhythm, and each leaf moves at a different rhythm. And all of this is a damping effect. So the tree is absorbing and kind of shrugging off the power of the wind. If you cut out a lot of the limbs from a redwood, you decrease the damping effect, which increases the amount of force being applied to the root zone. So the tree on the right is actually more likely to blow over than the tree on the left. All right, next slide. All right, the tree on the left doesn't even look like a redwood. This is a topped redwood. And sometimes, if there's utility lines above the tree, and I'm not talking about communication lines, I'm talking about electricity lines. Sometimes trees are planted in the wrong place, and the only option is to either remove the tree or chop the top off to keep it out of the electric lines. And that really would be the only time that I would be kind of recommending chopping the top off of a redwood or a sweet gum. I think the photograph in the middle is just either a homeowner did that or somebody with a ladder, and they could only reach up a certain height, and that's where they decided to cut the tree. I think there's absolutely no reason for poor tree trimming like that. If you're going to trim the tree that hard, you may as well remove it. That's kind of step one in removal. The picture on the right-hand side is two more topped sweet gums. Just poor pruning practices. Picture on the left is topping. Picture in the middle is excessive thinning or lion's tailing. So all these long branches and then a little poof of green at the end. And then the picture on the right, I think what happened was it was topped at some point, and then it regrew some sprouts, and then somebody did some excessive crown raising, and now you're left with a Dr. Seuss tree. And I think all of these practices are not acceptable within your community. All right, do prune properly. Next slide. So proper pruning is less obvious than poor pruning. So no more than 25% of the live foliage. The tree on the left is before, the tree on the right is the same tree after it's been pruned. You can see it's a little bit neater. There's a little bit less green. We have not taken off more than 25% of the live foliage. All right, next slide. When we're teaching our pruning crews, we really aim for something called structural pruning. And structural pruning aims to develop and maintain stable trees. We remove or reduce branches that compete with the leader. So if you, these are actually the same tree. The tree on the left doesn't really have a central leader. The tree on the right's been pruned as a young tree to develop a good central leader. We've removed branches that were clustered together and growing from one point. So what we've done is young tree training, and we've set this tree up to be a successful, mature tree. The tree on the left is about the same size, but it's got some poorly attached branches. It's got more than one branch doing the same job, and the tree on the left will more likely have limb failure as it becomes a mature tree. The tree on the right will have a beautiful structure as it matures. All right, next slide. Examples of poor structure. The tree on the left kind of splits like a wishbone, and it's called codominant leaders. And that's a really weak structure. When we see something like this, we try to catch it when it's young. If it was a young tree, we could actually fix that by shortening one of the leaders and picking one that we wanted to become the main leader. When we see trees like this at this size, we actually recommend removal and replacement. Picture in the middle is the same tree. The picture on the right, you can see you've got one large trunk, and then it splits into two codominant trunks. And in the middle, in between the two, is something called included bark. So there's no connective tissue between that section of the trunk. Where you see that crack in the trunk or that line, there's no connective tissue. And we see structure like this leading to failure frequently. All right, next slide. Pruning for structure. A lot of trees that we get from the nurseries have been topped when they're young, and then you get multiple branches growing from the topping point. So the tree on the left-hand side, if you look at the little circle, you can see multiple branches, all of the same size, starting from the original topping cut at the nursery. And then the tree on the right, what we've done is we've repaired that tree and we've created a stronger central leader. All right, next slide. Structure prune when trees are young. This saves you money. Fix the structure while they're young. They don't need to be pruned annually, and we've trained them when they're young. All right, next slide. Right, this might be a slide that would have been better left in a slideshow, maybe for your board and for your management company, maybe not for the residents. But we can address. Oh. Sorry, Elisa.
Is that okay? Did you want to go back?
Yeah, if you can go back.
Okay, it's not letting me go back.
All right. If it's not letting you go back, let's just keep going forward.
Alrighty.
All right. Don't have a monoculture. All right. Next slide. A monoculture is too much of the same thing. Next slide. If you have a large community and you've got the same tree all over the community, they're all the same age, the same size, the same species, you are at risk of a mass die-off or disease. You're at risk of massive amounts of removals, and this is an age monoculture as well. So if you look around your community and you think, all of these trees are mature, there's no young trees, then you have an age monoculture. If you look around your community and you think all of these trees are the same species, then you have a species monoculture. And the problem is that you get one insect that comes in and just wipes out all of your ash trees. And if you've got mostly ash trees, you just lost most of your trees. All right, next slide. Diversify, protect your forest. Don't have more than 10% of any one species, and try working with native trees and drought-tolerant trees that require less water. Next slide. This is what keeps me in business. The wrong tree in the wrong place. Tree on the left was a small tree when it was planted, and what we've seen now is that the roots have lifted up the walkway. So the roots are damaging the hardscape, and the result that we see frequently is that a construction company comes in, takes away that broken bit of concrete slab, cuts the roots, puts in a new slab and leaves, and then 5 to 10 years later, that tree falls over because the roots were cut. Tree in the middle, I'm sure was a lovely little tree when it was planted, but now it is too big and too close to the house. It's impossible to get any kind of clearance pruning, and we're going to start seeing roots damage the foundation of that house, damage the plumbing. The tree on the right is a redwood, and one of the things we see with redwoods being the wrong tree in the wrong place is redwoods need a lot of space and they need a lot of water. And I think the redwoods that I've looked at within your community all appear to have ample space and are getting ample water. Nope. I lost the slideshow.
Brian, can you see the slideshow?
Yeah.
Maybe that was a me problem.
Yeah, still have it on.
Okay.
I'm going to give it just a sec, and then if you're not able to get it back on, I think you were fairly close to the end of it.
Sorry, I have bad internet where I live, so
no problem.
This is my problem.
While he's doing that, just real quick for the members that are on, I don't think I mentioned it earlier. So Peter here is going to be doing at least 2 of these tree care workshops with us. So this was the first kind of the trial. We wanted to see how many people would attend, how many people had questions or concerns. The second we'll likely look to do in October, and we'll see if we can have it be an in-person meeting. In addition to that, all of the information that we have here that Peter is showing is being recorded. So we'll have and sorry for that. All of the information on is being recorded, so we'll have that available for the members. And Peter, if you're still having issues, I've got your presentation up. It looks like you were fairly close to the end. Do we want to wait another minute or two to see if you can get the last few slides?
Yeah, just give me 1 minute.
No problem at all. And then, I guess also while you're doing that, for the members that are on, again, once Peter is done, we're going to open up for Q&A. So question for the people that are on is, we're going to try and have it be through the chat as well as a raised hand, so that way not everybody's speaking all at once. Does everybody know how to use either the chat feature or the raised hand feature?
All right, I'm back.
Okay.
Not hearing any, I'm not seeing any shaking heads. Everybody's okay. I've got some thumbs up. Okay, so then as soon as Peter's done, we'll open it up. We'll use the chat. We'll use the raised hand feature so that everybody can ask some questions of either Peter or myself.
All right, I apologize for that.
No problem, Peter. You've got your slide back up?
Yes.
Okay, so we're on Right Tree, Right Place.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. I think I'm getting some interference with something else. All right, so we all love having big trees around us. I think we're recommending, or this slide's recommending, that your big trees should be at least 50 feet away from the house. That's not always possible. Then have medium-sized trees that you can have a little closer to the house, and then shrubs kind of fairly close to the house. You want to be careful of planting anything underneath electricity lines. I think this is a photograph we've pinched from PG&E. All right, next slide. All right, do number 4, include tree healthcare. All right, next slide. All right, so tree healthcare is sometimes chemical applications. Sometimes it's just water. Sometimes it's mulch. So the tree on the left is suffering from drought and competition with other plants. So our recommendation on a tree like this would be take away the shrubs from the base of the tree. I think there's a bunch of ivy at the base of that tree. So we would remove the ivy, that's the competition, and then we'd make sure that that tree is getting sufficient water. The photograph in the middle is, I'm sure everybody's seen aphids. They're fairly easy to take care of. They're easier to prevent than they are to get rid of. So preventative treatments early in the year work much better than trying to treat them now when the aphids are a big problem and causing a bunch of sticky honeydew all over your driveway or walkway. The picture on the right is fungal disease or bacterial and fungal diseases. The fire blight in pear trees is a bacterial disease, and we can keep that at bay with yearly treatments. And then pine pitch canker is the other picture, and that can be helped with just a bark spray. Is a little bit of chemicals just sprayed directly onto the bark. It's absorbed in through the bark and helps with fungal infections like pine pitch canker. All right, next slide. You guys do have bronze birch borer, and you do have a lot of birch trees. And birch tree on the top left is a nice healthy birch. The two lower photographs is a picture of the bronze birch borer and its larvae. And the picture on the right is an infested birch, and it dies from the top down. And we do have these in the Sacramento area. If you do nothing, the tree can break and parts of the tree can fall down. So our recommendation is a trunk injection of a chemical called mectonite once every 2 years. And we're seeing apparently, we're seeing a 99% success rate. I'm not sure about the 99% number, but I think I've experienced treating trees and seeing the protection that pre-treating your trees gives them. All right, next slide. All right, another tree healthcare product that we use is a tree growth regulator. These two trees in this photograph were planted at the same size and the same time, and the tree on the left was treated with a growth regulator, and it actually just stunts the tree, slows it down. So instead of the tree growing 4 feet a year, it's only growing 1 foot a year. So if you've got limited space, something like a growth regulator is a great idea. All right, next slide. Something that not many people think about is taking care of the soil and the roots. So healthy soil means healthy roots. Tree roots are often the root of tree health issues. Healthy soils means stronger, more resilient trees, and this saves you money in the long run. And looking at the River Lake area, you guys are very lucky. You have some very nice soil. And I think a lot of your tree health is because of your fantastic soil. Soil amendments versus fertilizers. Fertilizer is a chemical. It's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. It adds nutrients to the soil, and it directly affects plant growth. This is not food for plants. It's just nutrients. Plants produce their own food through photosynthesis in the leaves. Fertilizer is kind of like getting in your car and turning the key. Fertilizer does that to trees. It just kind of turns the key and gets it going. Amendments improve soil physical condition, soil structure, and water infiltration, and indirectly affects plant growth. Soil amendments that we use are biochar and products called Essential, which is nutrients and humic acid. All right, next slide. Just a few photographs showing treated and untreated trees, or before and afters. So stressed oaks before on the left, and then 1 year later. I think this was treated with biochar and essential. And then olive trees, the ones on the left are being watered only. The ones on the right, same property, kind of different side of the property, were getting the same amount of water, but we had treated these with biochar and essential. And you can see they're greener and fuller. All right, next slide. Keep your wood chips. We create a lot of wood chips and a lot of biomass, a lot of mulch. So we highly recommend spreading mulch in your yard. We really don't recommend spreading rock chips or ground up rubber or even dyed wood chips. Just fresh wood chips, I think, are the best for your soil. It helps your soil retain moisture. It reduces soil compaction. It increases soil nutrients and improves soil structure. And if you keep your own wood chips, it decreases the price of your tree work, because we don't have to pay to dispose of it. All right, final takeaways. Start with an inventory and assessment. This will be the foundation of your management plan and budget. Do proactive tree work, or proactive tree work will always be better and cheaper than reactive. And take the time to look at your trees. If you look at your trees on a daily basis or a weekly basis, you will see when the tree changes. You'll see if something goes wrong or if something negative is happening to your tree. All right, I think that's the last slide. Any questions?
All right, thank you for that, Peter. For the record, for everybody that's on, Peter and I talked about a 10 to 15 minute little presentation, which I think right now we're at about 45 minutes, which is just proof that Peter really does love trees, and I think could talk about them for a very long time. Again, we're going to open up for questions, and if anybody wants to put them into the chat or into the raise your hand, I'm going to be going through and looking at them. We've got a couple in the chat already, so I'll read these out. So the first is, policy dictates lawn watering 2 days per week. Is it reasonable to think that lawn watering 2 days a week is enough to deep water ladder trees?
Um,
Hold on one sec. I think, Greg, we've got you muted there. Did you mean larger trees?
I did, as a typo.
Okay. No problem, no problem, no problem. Yeah, so then is it reasonable to think that lawn watering 2 days a week is enough to deep water larger trees?
That's a great question, Greg, and no. When you're watering your lawn, you're watering only for a few minutes every day, or every day that you're allowed to water, and the water is really only infiltrating a couple of inches if you're lucky. And tree roots are going to be, I don't know, 12 to 18 inches down. Some of that water is getting to your trees. If you're starting to see surface roots, it's because you're not watering deep enough and you're actually forcing the tree roots to come up to the surface. So frequent shallow watering leads to more surface roots. Infrequent deep watering leads to better roots. So I'm a tree guy, I'm not a turf guy. And trees and turf look really nice together, but they really need different things. My experience is that trees and turf should ideally be on a separate watering system. And your big trees probably only need to be watered once a month, but maybe with a soaker hose for an hour or two, so that you're slowly getting water deeper into the soil.
And I think that took us into the next question, which is, what is the city's policy for hand watering and how often should that be done for mature trees in the hot summer months?
So there's no kind of hard or very few hard and fast rules for trees. Most questions like this, I end up answering, starting the answer with the word "it depends." So it depends on the species of the tree. It depends on your soil. It depends on your city regulations. in the summer, what I'm looking for in my yard is anytime leaves start to, sorry, there's my hand. Anytime leaves start to droop, then they need more water. So you want your leaves to be kind of fluffed up. They can drop a little bit, but if they get too droopy, you can reach the point of no return and you're going to lose all of your leaves. So I don't know what your city's rules are on hand watering.
Okay.
I can find out, and I think what we can do after this maybe is post a bunch of questions, and I'll in an email form, and I'll reply to all of them, and we can send them out to everybody.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think Alita has some literature from the water organization on what that is too. So she may be posting something in a quarterly update or something. But Peter, anything you could shed any light on, you can shed on it, would be awesome.
Okay.
Looks like we've got a hand raised from Miss Rita Leahy.
Thank you, Brian.
Mhm.
Mr. Green, that was very, very informative.
Thanks, Rita.
Very, very helpful. I greatly appreciate it, as I'm sure all the people listening did. I want to make sure that my hearing hasn't failed me like other body parts. Did I hear you say that thinning redwoods is a no-no, never, don't do it?
Yes. There's really no need for it. If you were to look at redwoods in the wild, there's nobody out there thinning them.
Okay.
There's, in
Thanks
fact,
again. This was just very, very helpful.
okay.
Okay, looks like we got another question in the chat. Can you talk about large surface roots on mature trees that crack your driveway or are cracking your driveway? Assuming they're having a specific problem.
So roots are responsible for holding the tree up. If you've got roots that are damaging your sidewalk or your driveway, if you imagine looking down on the top of a tree from above, you want to see the roots going out like bicycle spokes. So ideally, you've got roots in all directions spreading out from the tree. If you've got one root in particular that's breaking your driveway or your sidewalk, it is possible to go in and surgically remove one root. If you start removing multiple roots, you can imagine maybe looking down on a pizza and just more and more pieces of the pizza being missing. And once you've lost about a third of your slices of pizza, you've lost a lot of tree stability and you can have the tree fall over. And typically trees fall over away from the side where you've cut the roots. So if there's a tree next to your driveway and you cut the roots, the tree's not going to fall into your driveway, it's going to fall away. So the roots don't act as props, they kind of act as cables underground, stopping the tree from falling over. This is part of the wrong tree in the wrong place. If you've got a large tree really close to a driveway, it's maybe a design feature that should have been kind of caught in the design phase where, all right, don't plant a camphor tree within 2 feet of a driveway. Don't plant trees that get massive right next to a driveway. We also see problems with driveways and walkways being poured too thin. So a 6-inch thick concrete driveway or walkway should resist most roots, but we commonly see 3-inch walkways and driveways, and those crack fairly easily. So if your construction company was trying to cut some corners, they didn't put much rebar in, they gave you a thin driveway, then you're going to see more hardscape damage. And I think dealing with cracked driveways versus roots is dealt with on an individual basis, where our company and your architectural review committee would look at each tree individually and look at the damage that it's creating and kind of come up with some suggestions.
Good question. Thank you. We've got a few more coming in. Are you familiar with methodologies to monetize the value of mature trees in a community?
Yes. So what that looks at is people way smarter than me with really big calculators have sat down and said uh, the big trees in our community absorb X amount of carbon dioxide, they trap X amount of pollutants, they decrease the amount of air conditioning that you need. So
I've done it before. It's not
Okay.
like it.
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. Peter, go ahead.
So that really wouldn't be something that our company would be looking at. I think, yes, there's a huge value to having trees in your community and a huge value to having large trees in your community. The carbon capture, there's, I don't know, lists and lists of the pros of having large trees. I personally don't deal with the kind of monetization of keeping those trees. It's just not part of my business model to look at the actual dollar value or perceived dollar value of your trees.
Okay, thank you. Some of us have huge oak tree limbs hanging over our houses. What kind of trimming can prevent a huge limb from crashing into our home?
So weight reduction pruning rather than lion's tailing. So you would be pruning weight off the ends of the branches to decrease the leverage out at the end. If you're pruning the inside of the tree, so kind of taking little leaves and little branches out of the inside of the tree, it makes it look very pretty, but it's not doing anything for the adjusting the leverage on those branches. So when you've got big oak trees, you want to have them pruned on the outside, and they want to be pruned correctly, but with an emphasis on weight reduction. So you would be shortening the lever arm and you would be decreasing the weight at the end of the lever. That's going to decrease the likelihood of limb failure. You also want to have your large oak trees monitored. There's nothing that you can do to stop an oak tree aging out. As they age, they start to fall apart. They get woodpecker holes, they get decay areas, they get squirrel nests. So this is all part of monitoring, and you need to have your trees monitored. If you've got really large trees, pay somebody to climb up in that tree and monitor your tree to assess the tree. Look for stuff standing on the ground with binoculars. You can't see the tops of the branches. So you really need to have somebody either climb up the tree or fly a drone around in the tree or take a bucket truck and get up in the tree and be able to look at each tree, look at each branch, look at the attachment points, look at the tops of the trees, look for signs of squirrel nests, look for signs of woodpecker holes. We do put cables in big old oak trees, which would decrease some of the weight load on the overextended branches. Sorry, it's a short answer to a question that could be very long.
I think it was something, so appreciate that. Continuing on, so for deep watering, you said a soaker hose for an hour once a month is appropriate. In the summer months, do you recommend deep watering more often?
Yes. So once again, not a hard and fast rule. You would have to be kind of keeping an eye on your trees. And I've got some trees in my yard that need to be watered on a weekly basis. So something like a cherry tree is going to require a lot more frequent watering. So maybe the cherry tree in the front of your yard, you water once a week with a soaker hose, or it kind of depends on the size of the tree. If you've got something like a giant valley oak in your front yard, it's possible that that thing has roots everywhere and it's got a giant amount of soil that it can tap for water resources. And if you don't see the leaves wilting at all, then it possibly doesn't need any water. So it depends on the species, it depends on the size, depends how much sun it's getting. If it's a Japanese maple, it's going to need more frequent watering. If it's a redwood, probably once a month is fine.
Okay, thank you. Some redwood trees in the area grow taller. Could these trees be cut on the top to prevent it from growing taller? I think this goes into what you were saying at the beginning of the trees.
So cutting the tops out of redwoods does not stop them from growing taller. All you're doing is cutting off that top, and the tree really tries to grow a new top. So if you look at any redwoods that have been topped, they send up as many sprouts as they can to try to recover and get back to the original size. Redwoods get big and tall. There's not really much you can do to stop the redwoods from getting big and tall. And if you think, oh, my redwood's growing faster and taller than my neighbor's redwood, it's possible that your soil is better. It's possible that there's more water resources for that tree. So there's a few different reasons why a tree would grow taller than a tree down the road.
Okay. Thank you for that. I don't see anything else in the chat. Oh, looks like the Sudos have a hand up. We still got you muted. There we go. Go right ahead.
Hi, Peter, thank you. I agree with the earlier comments about the presentation was very informative, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate the board putting this together, and you as well. We have a group of redwoods in front of our house. There's a total of 11 of them. A lot of them have a lot of brown branches in them that appear to be dead. And so what would you recommend that happen to the ones in front of us? And it appears that the watering has been increased in our area, but also in the process, we're losing the topsoil, and there's a great amount of roots exposed. Any recommendations?
Okay, so this time of the year, it's going to be fairly appropriate to have some brown in your redwoods. So we're getting to the end of summer. You're getting 3-year-old and 2-year-old needles that are starting to die off. It's part of the tree's mechanism of making it through California summers. So brown needles, not too big of a problem. If you're getting brown branches, the entire branch is brown, there's no green on it whatsoever, it might be a sunlight issue where you've got a dense group of trees, and the tree has decided that that branch is no longer worth kind of giving any resources to, because that branch is not collecting any sunlight. So sometimes trees, uh-oh, my dog's just come in. Sometimes trees will kind of sacrifice a few branches. So if you're seeing brown branches in the center of your group of trees, it might not be a bad thing, but it's also worth having an arborist come out and have a look if you're concerned. As far as losing the topsoil a little bit, some mulch would be wonderful, and you're probably losing topsoil because of your gardeners with their blower and their rakes. So if you were to look in a forest underneath a redwood, you'd see that there would be a carpet of old redwood needles. And what we typically see with landscape companies is that they come in with their blower and they blow all the beautiful redwood needles away, and you slowly over many years start to lose your topsoil. You lose that protective covering that's over the surface roots. So my advice would be stop the landscaper from taking away all those beautiful leaves, let them decay into the soil. They put nutrients back in the soil. So underneath the redwoods, if possible, let the leaves stay on the ground. And your landscaper can blow them kind of into the center or rake them into the center. So they're just staying there. They can be neat. You can still kind of have your turf up to the drip line, and then underneath the drip line or within the drip line, you could just have a nice brown carpet that's protecting your trees.
All right, so we're getting just past our hour, so I want to wrap up the last few questions. I've got another one here in the chat. If anybody else has anything, please go ahead and send it in now. I've got, is it better to prune a flowering pear tree after it drops all of its leaves?
It's easier to prune a lot of trees once they drop their leaves, because then we can actually see the structure of the tree a bit better. As far as better, health-wise, I think after kind of pruning towards the end of the year would be better health-wise than pruning in the middle of summer. A lot of times pruning a tree forces the tree to grow new leaves and new twigs. And if you were to do that earlier in the year, you would be generating a lot of new growth kind of into the heat of the summer. And because it was new growth, it would burn more easily. So yes, I think pruning flowering pears kind of towards the second half of the year would probably be better for the tree. Would it be terrible if you pruned it any other time? I think our weather in California is mostly fairly mild. We don't get horrendous winters. I think if you were back east, someplace where it was really cold, it would be much more important when you were pruning your trees. If you've got one tree in your yard and you want to prune it in fall, that's probably going to be much better. If you're looking at it from my perspective, and I'm looking at a couple of thousand trees in a community, I can't prune all of them in October. I have to prune some of them in March, April, May. So for a tree care company, it just becomes a time issue. I can't squeeze all the tree trimming into the perfect time. So we would prune trees pretty much any time of the year. There's certain trees that I would definitely stay away from pruning in the middle of summer because you might attract insects that would be harmful to your trees. So certain oak trees, certain pine trees, I would say don't prune in the middle of summer. Anything delicate like anything with thin bark. So if you look at a Japanese maple, the bark's really thin. I would prune those very delicately kind of towards the end of the year so that I'm not allowing the bark to get sunburnt. I hope that answered your question.
All right, thanks, Peter. And I don't see any other questions in the chat. I'm going to look around the room. Any other questions? Any raised hands? No? Okay. If there are any questions, if anybody thinks of anything after the meeting, please feel free to shoot them to management. If you want to send it to the info@riverlake.org email address, I will receive it. I'll forward it on to Peter, have him respond to it directly. Otherwise, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we've got quite a bit of tree maintenance work that is currently scheduled, and it'll start taking place next week. We'll be sending out notice to the membership. I want to thank you, Peter, again for the presentation, for the information, for agreeing to speak with a number of the members. And again, for everybody on, we're going to try and do another one of these workshops. It'll be likely the middle of October. So we'll send out notification for that.
And maybe for the next one, if you guys can email in any questions beforehand, and instead of me wasting everybody's time with a lengthy presentation and slides, we'll just address questions that you've kind of pre-sent us.
That'll be perfect as well. So yeah, what we'll do is when we send out the next notification, we'll try and give plenty of advance notice, and then we'll also let the members know that they can send in their questions in advance so that we can have them answered. I think I saw one more hand go up. Was that Dr. Stacy Hunter Schwartz?
That was just my applause reaction hands.
Oh, the applause rate. Thank you for that. The good applause. So yeah, thank you again, Peter. Great information. Thank you all for attending. Again, any additional questions, please send them into management. We'll be happy to send it to Peter. Otherwise, you will likely all see Peter on site. He is our representative for A+. So with all the work that is scheduled to be done, Peter is very involved. He's kind of the overseer, so he's working closely with management. So you will likely see him around the community. So yeah.
And a big thank you to all of you guys for putting up with me for an hour.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it. Thank you all. Have a good rest of the evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.